I mean, what I love to capture is that moment when history is just on the cusp of curing into myth, when it's just there changing. It's like the clabber's turning into cheese. Well, the history is turning into myth, and things that actually happened in the retelling and retelling and retelling are becoming better stories, and historians would say less accurate, but I would say no, perhaps more accurate to what they mean in human terms. I got my start doing these sort of no-budget costume dramas in Cajun French. We'd subtitle them in English. We were blowing the doors off the theaters in the coastal fringe of Louisiana. Nobody had ever done it before. People were taking pride in what had been denigrated, and this was part of that. And then the whole Cajun food craze. It was not only okay to be Cajun, it was cool. I think it's huge. It's huge. It's huge because when you see something, I mean, forget the big screen, when you see something on TV, when you see something on, nowadays when you see it on your phone, when you see those moving images in a public forum, it imparts a validity that, a lot of times wasn't there before.
You can rely on the story. I mean, in film school, it's the first thing they teach you is, it doesn't matter what actor you have, it doesn't matter what camera you have, it doesn't matter the production quality of what you're doing. If that story is compelling, it's gonna get told, and somebody's gonna listen to it.
An entire generation is now going to grow up with a Southern backdrop to their stories, and that's pretty extraordinary.
It feels like a dream now. I mean, we have films everywhere. There's so many films going on. The younger kids nowadays, they can be growing up on this, and they're not gonna realize like how it was before.
Right now we're at a place where it's rare to find someone that doesn't know about Louisiana or someone that hasn't shot here. I mean, you're going to have 2 or 3 major blockbusters next year that are hitting at summertime with Terminator, Jurassic World. You'll have Fantastic Four. You'll have Pitch Perfect 2 coming out, and all of those were shot in Louisiana, not to mention all the accolades that we got during award season.
I love the Hollywood South, basically. The whole Southern charm, it really exists.
There could be another word for it. It could be like the Southern Renaissance in film or something.
I don't like the name Hollywood South because they tried it in Orlando and they called it Hollywood East. It bombed. It's really just the film industry in the South, in my opinion. And it's just, we need to make our own reputation because you're not going to take anything from Hollywood. Hollywood is always going to be Hollywood. But there's no reason we can't have a great film industry in Louisiana as we do. And the comparison, I think, is unjust to Louisiana hard workers. It's just, shouldn't do it.
It doesn't really mean anything to me other than that it's an easy way for people to understand the scope of what really is happening here. Initially, when the tax credits first came to town, I would say it was 98% was on location. People were coming here specifically for Louisiana and New Orleans. As things have grown, the industry has expanded. We've gotten studios, warehouse space been converted to studio space, and actually we can make pretty much anything work except for, crystal blue water, beaches, and mountains.
People from here, like people from any place, like to look at how they're being represented on film and TV. It's a favorite parlor game. And I think mostly people have always felt that the depictions have been singularly terrible. I mean, and they're right. You can think of 100 movies where, they're set in New Orleans and people are drawling with these big Southern accents.
If they come to me and they say, we want it to look like Louisiana, then, what comes to mind is what comes to everyone's mind. And it exists, and it's here, and it's beautiful, but it's stereotypical, and we have so much more. They want cypress trees and bayous and, the river and alligators, and voodoo. It's a little, it's great that it's so iconic, those pictures that come to mind when someone thinks of Louisiana. That's not all we are. We have that.
Because in the American psyche, in the international psyche, it's easier to believe you'd have a town with vampires and werewolves and shapeshifters and fairies and goodness knows what they call them, soups, what other kind of soups in Louisiana than it would if it were Iowa. It's more readily acceptable. It's easier to suspend disbelief.
Well, back here we've created everything from Twilight to Maze Runner to House on Haunted Hill to Dream Boy. To Long Hot Summer was shot out here, so you can create whatever you like. Alvarez Kelly was shot meters from where Long Hot Summer was shot, and that's really the magic of movies, is the fact that you can do so much with just space and just ideas. So actually one of the things we're considering at the moment, if we're allowed to with the environment and everything else, is to dam two ends of this and create a controlled area where we can use for a Peter Pan shoot that we're doing. So the same sense and the same building blocks can become something completely different. And here we've doubled Vietnam lots of times for lots of different productions. And then it's a battle to decide what to keep. So for example, under here, we want to maintain and keep it because you've got kind of a post-apocalyptic sort of look. You've got a very natural woodland look. You've got a kind of in the trenches type thing, and it's perfect for everything from a Western to a military to an action to a fantasy. And all the way around, we have just that complete range and the ability to come at it from every direction. And you'll notice these are up high, so you can set your cameras and have a completely different perspective and create something really, really unique that no one else has ever created, even if they've used that exact section. Where this really opens up and you get complete sand. And it literally looks like a beach. And it easily doubles for a beach. In fact, that's how G.I. Joe was done. They did the beach landings about a mile that way. Well, the fact is that wherever I'm making a film, whether it's Canada, England, Louisiana, wherever, you have certain things that never change. Accountants work long days and don't need to travel too much. Editors like to wake up and just start working. And actually, you can turn a room that could be a bedroom into an edit suite because the edit suite can take up a lot of space. We're commonly just dropping them into an office or whatever else. So we can look around and say, okay, well today, because we're shooting in this part, we'll turn all of that size into the support. Film is the only industry in the world where, regardless of the cost of creating something, the purchase price remains the same. So you create something that costs $350 million, the ticket is still going to cost you $10, $16, $20, whatever it is in your neck of the woods. That means that there's another weird economic at stake, which is people will make something and the market will tell them, you're making a can of Coke that should be $1 and you're making it for $6. And sometimes they'll be right, and a lot of the times they'll be wrong. And that's the weird and wacky thing about film.
Because the real issue right now, the much bigger picture, is that the film industry is decentralizing. It used to be based in Hollywood almost exclusively, and now with the advent of technology where you can make a film from start to finish out on location, with cost of living and quality of life issues, the industry really is more mobile, and it's leaving California in droves, and California recognizes this, and that's why they're putting their own incentive plan in place.
The vision I have, or the way I think of it, is a concentric circle. Like the economic development incentives are designed to bring big money productions here, and they do. We get these huge, giant productions in TV and film. Right now, today, there are 18 shows, either television shows or feature films in production in New Orleans. There's no crew available, which is great. It's exactly what we want, and that's jobs, and that's a key core piece of what we want to happen. But film is cyclical and itinerant and project-based, so the benefits have been that when things aren't in production, there's trained crew available for indie work. There's been an emergence of brick-and-mortar locally based businesses that serve the film industry that also serve us. So we've been able to get sponsorships for programs, sponsorships for equipment from local camera houses and post houses and from the union who want to see the culture work. And then as a result of all of that, there's been an influx of independent filmmakers who are highly trained who've chosen to live and work in New Orleans and now Baton Rouge.
It used to be you get caught behind parades. This is a city of parades. You still get caught behind parades, but now you get caught with film productions. You see the trucks lined up.
You create an opportunity for the outside public to come into a space that they've never been into before. Opening up the doors and allowing for the community to come in and see something that they've never seen before. It's a bit of an awe. that you look at from the outside the majority of the time, that there's these massive buildings with these massive lights and these stars behind those walls. Open up those doors, allow them to come in and see what it is that we have to offer, but doing it in a celebratory sort of way. Where we're trying to put together this film studio here in Chalmette, they had once, 55,000 people here, and it's only about 35,000 strong. Here we are 8 years after the storm, and we're still trying to find that economic engine that's going to make this town flourish. Yet we're only 8 miles from the inner city. They've got a lot of work to do, and they're willing to do it. They're very hardworking people, and now that we've come up with this opportunity, they're very excited to have us here, and we've been welcomed with open arms. And man, we have taken the ball and we've run with it.
There was always an industry here that it was very small but very committed. Small studios and a lot of the basic equipment that you needed. Certainly not the giant Hollywood studio, but and those people worked hard, very hard, to keep that industry going here.
I spent a year as the film commissioner of Louisiana back in '89, '90. It's the longest year of my life. I'd never had a real job before and haven't had one since. And while I was in there, we passed through the first tax incentive, and we modeled it on Arkansas's tax incentive. And I don't think any company ever claimed it because it was so sort of Byzantine and, and was pretty stingy anyway and stuff. And it's not like I came up with this thing. I mean, the writing on the wall, states were starting to do that because so much production was going to Canada. They had even built a French Quarter street in Toronto at one of the studios, which was like, kind of a wake-up call.
I've done everything. I started when I was in my teens. Camera, grip, everything you can imagine, just to work my way up. Moved out of town because you had no validity working in Louisiana, and graduated college, went to Los Angeles, came back and started doing some more work, and wound up moving to Hollywood East in Orlando, which really never developed. But I taught in Orlando at a place called Full Sail. So I was teaching production and got involved with training Avid and started a company called Big Easy Training Center. Moved back to New Orleans and started training Avid and Pro Tools. And ultimately that became Louisiana Institute of Film Technology, LIFT. We started getting involved with legislation to try to change legislation. And this is back in '99, and it failed in 2000. So we started another run. We started meeting with different politicians, Steve Scalise, Jay Darden, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. And just trying to find out what the best thing to do is. So we got a group. Kathleen Blanco organized a group. It was like 8 of us involved in a closed circuit group, plus a lot of attorneys, and try to figure out what was the right way to do this. Florida had tried to pass legislation that failed. So I got a hand on a copy of the legislation, brought it to the film commissioner, and we kind of got a start on writing it. We got the unions involved and started lobbying. And with past connections and friends, we brought in some heavier players from Los Angeles to help start this whole thing. So we were literally waiting to shoot a music video. There was a couple of them coming up from a company out of Los Angeles. And once we passed it in '02, within 3 days, we shot the first music video, which is a Leanne Rimes video. And it was shot, I want to say it was like $600,000, which nowadays that's insane. Nobody spends that kind of money. But back in those days, they were spending $500,000 to $1 million on a music video. So that was the very first Louisiana tax credit project.
I was still kind of young. I was in high school at the time. And so the buildup was more that there was talks of studios being built here, different TV shows coming to film in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and a couple of movies. I think a little later than that, but I think Dukes of Hazzard was the first bigger movie that came through that got people excited about Hollywood coming to the South.
We've tried to make it as easy to understand. You come in, you spend $1, we'll give you 30% if it qualifies. So it's as simple as that. You get an additional 5% on your Louisiana resident labor. So it's fairly clear. If it's directly related to the production, you spend it. It's pretty easy to see if you rent a camera versus, you know, renting a car or something like that. You can tell. And it's really about being as easy to understand without many complications.
It had a few other things going for it. One is, you know, Louisiana, especially New Orleans, had always been the place that actors would want to go. As you say, it's exotic because of the setting, because it held a certain romance that you know, was a convenient backdrop. Also, and not to be underrated, it's doesn't snow here. People to see it, all those things happening, and then you had the tax incentives. And nobody, I think, was quite prepared for how effective it would be. And then the state did a very smart thing. They had a window of 2 years, 3 years, where they gave even bigger tax incentives to building infrastructure. And so studios went up. And you know, Panavision relocated here. Laboratories open, competing laboratories open when there had been none in the city for 20 years. And all of that happened, which made it, again, easier to film.
The state knows that if it starts monkeying around with its incentive package, starts lowering it, it starts tweaking it in a way that makes it less attractive, that basically for the film industry, it's a matter of math. Somewhere, some accountant is sitting down and working out the rate of return on equity.
And historically, that's what drives production pretty much everywhere. The more competitive your soft money is, the better. And soft money is a non-recoupable. It's effectively a grant, even if it's not called a grant. It's slightly confusing for a lot of people to call it tax credits or tax rebates, because it's got nothing to do with the tax that an individual on the production would be paying, or a producer would be paying, or anything else. It's being paid for by the taxpayer. That's what it means. And so if you spend a certain amount of money, a certain amount of money is coming back to you. And increasingly in independent finance, that's not part of the recoupment, i.e. the way you repay the money, it's part of the finance. So it's how you pay for the film to happen in the first place. And so the biggest films will go to the biggest tax credit jurisdictions. You can make that $6 can of Coke that I was talking about because it doesn't matter. Your money is already protected, your money is already out. And during that process, you're going to create so many jobs. So you're going to get sustainability from the infrastructure, from the crew base, from the fact that there will always be stuff happening here on the film, on the legitimate theater, on the music, and that's driven by state incentives.
On the other hand, the film industry is basically on wheels. You know, it can move at the drop of a hat.
And it wasn't until about 2009 that it became mature enough, if you will, that enough of the industry leaders got together and said, we really need to be speaking with one voice. We really need to understand what issues are affecting the industry, what issues affect the legislation and the legislature and the fiscal impact to the state, and try to grow this industry with some element of strategy in mind, and not just let it go wherever it went at the whim of the legislature, but really try to guide it and lead it and grow the film industry in the state of Louisiana. Again,
The incentive was designed to bring the production here and to generate the infrastructure and to generate the human capital and to make Louisiana an attractive place for filming beyond the life of the tax credits.
And again, we're just relying on other people's money. So we're not really truly developing an industry. How do you develop an industry? You actually have to have some type of capital.
But that is happening, and that is then going to be able to be translated into those banks and lenders lending to films for something other than tax credits. Mm-hmm. You know, it might be distribution rights, foreign pre-sales, and things like that. That's the direction that we're going in. This is all part of the maturation of this industry. And that really was what was intended with this law from the beginning. It was an investor tax credit to encourage locals to invest in the film industry. And that's actually what's happening now.
Well, the Saver Center was sitting there for years, and while the owners were trying to keep it up, it didn't look as good as other things around here, or as good as I would like for it to look. And one day I looked out there and it came up for auction, and my primary purpose to buy it was to clean it up and warehouse it. And thereafter we looked into various uses, including attracting another grocery store there. But the population had not grown down here sufficiently to justify a grocery coming into the parish. And then several months ago, the Terminator movie came to film right next door, and they came by and said we need additional property for the filming. And I met the principals and started thinking that might be an opportunity in them there hills.
So we're in our 20,000 square foot office facility. We came up with the idea of providing state-of-the-art soundstage studio space, but utilizing the 200,000 square feet that was already available. I'll show you here. Again, you know, this is the Lowe's that we talked about. That's 140,000 square feet under one roof and has plenty enough power and air conditioning to support any feature. And then we have another big box store which got washed away from the Katrina. That lays vacant that we are now going to turn into a construction mill. It's being utilized as storage space for a Paramount picture right now, but as soon as they're out. So we've had an opportunity to work with a lot of great people. But we've also had an opportunity to work at almost every facility that this state has to offer. And so by taking the pros and cons of each of those facilities and by listening to each one of the experts that we've had the opportunity to work with, all of them fled here, obviously for financial reasons, to really kind of give us an opportunity to make films here and give the state an opportunity to host them here. When we actually got started here, David McCarty went to parish government and said, give me a list of all the businesses that are here in St. Bernard Parish, saying, okay, look, you're within a mile radius of our facility. We know we're going to drive in blockbuster films. You're about to have over 500 people that will be here in our offices, on our campus, building. They're going to be constructing, they're going to be filming, they're going to need restaurants, they're going to need graphics companies, they're going to need services, cleaning, utilities, resources through raw materials. All of these things become extremely important to a movie because they need them, and they need them now. They need them right away. And so we went out and we actually reached to each of them and said, if this is going to be an economic engine, you need to grow with us, so be prepared for what's about to happen right down the road.
A big part of it as being an employer in the industry out here is just educating the community that here's what this can bring to you, and whatever you want to take from it is there for the taking. A big part of the industry being here is the tax incentives that are in place. They're great incentives, and there's not much they need to do to increase them, but it's really just making sure that they are there, because even though the state is kicking back money to the entertainment industry, it's bringing in so much money that just goes and gets spread out throughout the communities.
It's the same thing for the tax incentive that they set up for the petroleum company that's moving into Lake Charles, Louisiana. It's the same thing they do for the fracking industry in the north part of the state. It's a state level hit for local benefit. The challenge is, the question is, does the local benefit outweigh the state treasury loss? From the perspective of a local beneficiary, I think it does.
And the problem that any legislator has is a legislature has to say, well, it's got competing constituencies out there. And higher ed is saying, golly, we're getting killed here. The economics department is going at LSU from 25 tenure track faculty to 12. You know, we're trying to educate your kids, and basically $168 million is flowing out of the state. 168 million was based on 2012. So the hit to the state fisc is not going to be 168 million. It's going to be a number much bigger than that.
You know, to give a little context, the state budget is like $25 billion. Most of that money is sort of already dedicated to a variety of things, and it can't be touched. And the amount of money that the legislature is really kind of has to play with each year, so to speak, is pretty small. And there are only certain areas where they can make cuts. A lot of things are just statutory obligations that they have to do. So healthcare and higher ed are two areas that often come in for cuts when there isn't enough money.
In our state, we rely for state funding on really three major sources. We rely on the sales tax, the income tax, and mineral revenues. This recent drop in the price of oil, when it got down to 80, we saw a $170 million hole just created just like that overnight in the state budget. So once again, healthcare and higher education are looking around and saying, oh, shoot, we're going to get hit again. And at the same time, we're subsidizing this industry that's taking all this money out of the fisc. So that's where the opponents of the film tax code are going to come from, those people that are waiting on it. The income tax has not grown real strongly. And again, the governor said no taxes, no new revenue stream, no taxes or fees. So you cut. There's only two places you can cut. So that's kind of where we are right now.
the scale at which we're giving away money is rising rather quickly, and every year we have these sort of major budget holes. And the film program, I think, is controversial in a lot of the state because a lot of the state feels like they don't get anything from it, and probably legitimately because really most of the activity is in New Orleans and Baton Rouge and Shreveport to an extent, and then if you're in Alexandria.
I think that's as it should be. The city of New Orleans and the city of Baton Rouge do not have oil reserves. They do not have vast natural resources that can be utilized to bring industry. Our asset is our people and our infrastructure, and so we need to bring industries to our cities that use that. And I don't see a conflict with that, with the state level providing that benefit, just as they provide that benefit to other areas that have natural resources to exploit. I also feel like the film industry is a lot less intrusive environmentally and a lot less, or at least only equally as sketchy as any of the other industries that our state gleefully embraces.
So you spend $10 million, in Louisiana you're going to get about $3 million from the state. But what studies have shown over and over in Mexico, Louisiana, Canada, England, all over the place, is that when the state rebates a dollar, every dollar that's rebated generates something like $6.50, round about that, in the local economy. And it makes complete sense. And if you talk to anyone anecdotally in Louisiana, you can't move without tripping over someone that's done something on a film.
When they spend $50 million on a film here, where's that money going? You know, a lot of the money is going to people who don't live here, and then even some of the stuff that is going here is going to things like hotel accommodations. When we're always trying to attract tourists here, and when we get them here, we don't pay for 30% of their hotel bills. You know, there's a lot of things like that that I think when you start putting the 30% over it, you start thinking, well, why is it in the state's interest to pay for 30% of the catering costs of a film, but not of a wedding or of a whatever? I don't know. I mean, I think they're legitimate questions.
It is about determining what we need to do and what areas we need to attract and target so that we can diversify the economy. I mean, it's not an easy task. I don't think anyone looks at it as something being short term, but it's a fun term to say, diversifying our economy. Well, what are you doing? I mean, outside of oil and gas, agriculture, tourism, which are our big three industries, what else are you doing it? And this is doing it. This is really, doing what we set out to do 10 years ago.
And now right today, every single member of that crew is a Louisiana native or resident, and they're producing their own film based on relationships and opportunities that they were able to build through the kind of circle of interest and the buzz that's around production in Louisiana right now. And they're going to make a great film, and hopefully they'll sell it, and then they'll make a bunch more films, and they want to stay here. They have no desire to go to Hollywood. They don't want to leave. They're born and raised. They're Cajuns. So and now they have an opportunity that I guarantee you they wouldn't have had if we didn't have this. So I'm personally very invested because I see these stories all the time, and I know that if the tax incentives go away, the productions will go, and it will be swinging doors. It just happened in North Carolina. North Carolina just got rid of its incentives for the second time. North Carolina has twice passed incentive measures, twice built up infrastructure, twice brought production, the Dawson's Creek era in the 90s, and then most recently, Hunger Games was all shooting up there, right? Legislature vacated the tax incentives, everything shut down, and I had all these North Carolina filmmakers at the New Orleans Film Festival talking to me about should they move here. There's just not jobs.
I hope and pray that I'm able to stay, and I hope it is what we're doing in this state. I hope it is valuable for everyone in the state in the long run.
Things that stimulate, things that cause people to learn, cause people to question, cause people to dream and want to do things, and that's really, really exciting. That's something that you can't quantify. There's plenty that can be quantified, and people don't spend enough time perhaps quantifying it because it would make these types of propositions much more of a slam dunk than perhaps they're seen. But actually it's the creative side that's quite possibly worth even more.
Like, our culture is being depicted and preserved in a way, and our land and our place and our people are visible. And so there's clearly a benefit to that. The brain gain has been discussed about New Orleans. Like, people are moving to New Orleans and to Louisiana at rates that haven't been heard of in decades, if not centuries. Before Katrina, we had a deficit of people that were highly skilled creative workers. Before Katrina, we had the worst school system in the United States that was underneath investigation by the FBI. We were suffering from abject poverty, and those issues haven't been solved, but there's definitely a changing, and that's not entirely without controversy, but a changing face of what it means to be a New Orleans resident, and what New Orleans should look like and how it should serve its residents. It is a challenge because there's a dominant majority of incoming people who are white and educated and middle class, and that's not the cultural legacy of the city. But I also see so many benefits, and I see African American teenagers who think that they may have a career in film production that wouldn't have been an opportunity for them before this.
And that's where sustainability comes from, is people not rushing to find the next job. There's lots of jobs. It's actually rushing to come together to create really interesting things.
Well, I think if you approach it just looking at the risks, that's a big reason why nobody goes forward, because this is not for the faint of heart. To be honest with you, the economic risk to the individuals is bigger than that. It's beyond that. That's going to take care of itself. And it's a feeling more than it's looking at numbers. And it's an opportunity. The momentum's here. There's a need. We're going to fill that need.
As long as there's some state out there providing some sort of incentive, some sort of tax credit, if you want to keep the industry, you got to compete. I mean, I think if the tax credit went away, the film industry is not sustainable here. No, certainly not at the size it is now. It's just not going to happen. Because there's always going to be some place, maybe it's just California again. Remember the math, it's just a math thing, that has that subsidy in the equation that tilts things in their favor. So I think the only way you can have a sustainable industry in the state, given that there are other states out there doing something, you're just gonna have to have this credit, and you're gonna have to just take the hits to the fisc that are associated with it, which means you're gonna have to take political flack all the time.
We all know that stars drive the big business of the industry, if you will. But there's a lot of little indie films that have made it. The last couple of Academy Award winners have been indie films, and a lot of them have come from here, which has been fantastic.
The distribution apparatus, which by extension becomes the creative apparatus, because if you don't have a way to get it to an audience, you're not going to self-sustain. That's not here, and that's why I put my hope in other venues, pathways besides the theatrical release to home video to download to foreign sale. If it's possible to bypass that and still somehow, garner eyeballs and get a financial return, then you can be anywhere.
I think, first off, the digital revolution's come a few times, and it's gonna keep coming.
Just like technology changed the music industry, and now people buy songs when they want them or subscribe to a service, as opposed to buying an LP. And it used to be that they would go out on tour to promote an album. Now they drop an album to promote a tour. So it changed everything, right? Well, the same thing is happening in film, and naturally so.
We've seen the initial thing where sort of the middle is hollowed out. So the studios are making these huge movies on one hand, and and everybody and his brother is making little $50,000 features on the other hand. But the sweet spot where I was always, for me, was always those $3-4 million movies. It's hard to do those and get a return these days. That may be gone, and it may be gone for good.
And I have a feeling that in the next 10 years, we're not going to necessarily be looking at television up on in a channel network, if you will, surfing, we're going to be having a computer drive our monitor that will take us anywhere in the world that we want to go.
Distribution is a very complicated part of production now. Once it wasn't. You had NBC, CBS, ABC, right? You made a spot, that's where it went. So as marketers, we're all trying to figure that out and to best maximize our clients' dollars on what the content needs to look like. Not just the most eyeballs, where are the right eyeballs and can we get it in front of them, right?
And what we're seeing now is like more rides, more like Disneyland rides, like IMAX 3D, put a headset on and wear this thing and see all the stuff happening, which is great for the people. And it's where the innovation of the technology is headed towards a new experience for visual arts. But nothing will ever beat like Casablanca or, you know, Gone with the Wind, just because of the pure millimeter in the film that they shot, and the fact that film is liquid. You know, it's a liquid, living, organic thing. Film is unmatched by digital because it's not 0 and 1. It's a liquid process that is organic, that cannot be replicated with light.
You know, you've always had carpenters and stagehands, and you know, everyone. You know, it's the smell of the grease paint and the roar of the crowd. You know, everyone is working together. So as technology changes, I don't think the personalities change. It still takes a certain type of, you know, person to want to be a part of that. You know, it gets in your blood.
Without exception, people come to film, I think anyway, for the camaraderie, for the teamwork, for the shared vision, for the excitement of, but very few people just come for cash or fortune and glory. They come because they feel they have to do this. It's exciting and it's real, and that's what gives you true sustainability, because then you start looking for things that are long term, not short term. You're not looking at just what am I being paid today or what am I being paid this month. It's actually, what do I really want to achieve?
People joining the industry now have a hard road. It's been paved by a lot of other people, but it does also have a lot of opportunity, and it's more of a talent-based program. And I've seen a lot of people fail their way to the top, and it amazes me. And I think by that sheer numbers of new people, I mean, at one point it was just Hollywood with the big money, but I think you're getting the imagination of a lot of younger people, or not necessarily younger people in general who have stories that they want to tell.
But at the end of the day, if you want to get deep into it, there's only so many stories to tell. There's only so many parables on this planet and this earth, but yet everyone thinks that they want to tell their unique story that actually isn't unique. There's only so many things that you can do, and then what we see now is more of an awareness and the ability to rattle the sabers of, you know, awareness for things and what's going on in the moment, and actually observe ourselves in the world. And they'll say, oh, like the Coney 2012 thing that took off and then went away. You know, these things where you can say, like, right now this is happening, look, and it's produced in a way that everyone can see it and do it. But that's not storytelling and filmmaking.
When you think 100 years from now or 50 years from now, when people look back on American cinema, I think that we want to be proud of that that time period. We want to be proud of the things that are being made in our country culturally, creatively. We want to be innovators, and that just by default requires diversity of perspective, you know. So it's not even necessarily about race or gender, you know. It's not like, well, we need to get more women filmmakers or we need to get more black filmmakers. It's more saying we're running out of stories, and we need more stories, and we need more perspective. Because if it's the same thing over and over again, I mean, we're just kind of going in circles, you know. So I think it would be contributing to an art form on a much larger scale beyond just sort of like a creative capital, immediate creative capital.
The good news from y'all's standpoint is it's like the fishing industry. It's like farming. Our society has a thing about farming and about fishermen. We have the number 2 fish catch in the state, but the fishing industry is about the size of a film. It's tiny. Farming is less than 2% of our personal income. But when there's some non-pecuniary, I've used that word again, there's some non-monetary thing that people have about protecting farms, protecting fishermen, protecting film, and that saved your hiney for the last few years.
So, I mean, if you take Austin, which, you know, branded itself, built South by Southwest, branded itself as the live music capital of the world. It's not. We are. We are. But they won. They won that battle, and they just invested in it. Houston invested in contemporary arts culture, big time. Corporate partnerships and government money made Houston a cultural arts center that it was not before. Not that there hasn't been wonderful cultural in Houston, but a contemporary arts culture. Atlanta is investing in television, and it's investing in photography, a huge amount of photography, and it's investing in artist development services and understanding that a city, you know, Atlanta is so interesting because it's so big, and so it has, I think, in many degrees struggled to have an identity that's unique. So they're really focusing on arts development. And Miami, come on, Art Basel, like any city that has southern cities that have these great cultural legacies, they have invested in it. And I hope that New Orleans and the state of Louisiana can see that it has direct economic benefit. I mean, part of the reason that, I mean, what happens when someone moves here because there's just so much going on and it's so interesting and it's so cool and there's film production and comedy and music and art and all of these things are happening. They move here because they want that culture. And then they create startups and then they create or they, you know, improve existing businesses and then they invent a product and then they lift up communities. And that creates a level of middle-class aspiration that did not happen in New Orleans in 25 years ago.
I hope that we are able to continue on the path that the film tax credits have set us upon. It's an industry that has no great detrimental environmental impact like the oil industry does. You know, I think we very much depend on oil right now, and there's no getting around that. We all need to drive our vehicles throughout the country and the world, and and I have many family and friends that work in the oil industry. But as we move forward, I hope that industries like the film industry and information technology, you know, will become a bigger part of our local economy. And there's no telling what's going to happen with, you know, oil, with the world economy, or at least I can't. You know, I'm not a clairvoyant, but from my point of view, we're headed in the right direction. So.
And I think the reason why quote unquote documentary film is sort of having a renaissance right now is because people want to see new. You know what I mean? They're interested in like a new perspective that Hollywood is not willing to participate in the same kind of way. So I guess what I'm saying is that like there are tons of stories that are being told constantly, but they're on a certain level. And if there's a way to sort of match that with quality, you know, and access, I think we'd be doing ourselves a favor.